Yay Networks.
Hi, Wild Ones. Welcome back to the Wild Rose podcast. I'm Whitney Rose.
And I'm Connie Daniels.
And it has been a while since we've caught up, Connie.
I know. I've missed you. You've been busy.
Yeah, I just wrapped season 4 of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City.
How's that feel?
It is
Good.
Feels good to be done. We had a great season. We had a very, very explosive finale. So I can't wait for
How many months do we have to wait for this?
a couple months. We usually air in the fall, but I know there's been a lot on social media, a lot of chatter about it, but it was even more than people are speculating. So
Dang.
yeah, we wrapped up season 4 in a very big way, and I'm just glad to have like my normal crazy life back, because when I film, it's like crazy normal.
Right.
Yeah.
Back to some normalcy with kids, family life, work,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
all the stuff that you're doing anyways, but also being filmed and have the other aspect. But
Yeah, and we got to go on an international trip, so that was exciting, and I feel like I can share because it's already leaked on the internet.
Yeah.
We went to Bermuda, and it was beautiful.
Amazing. That's on my bucket list.
But other than that, I
Bermuda.
can't really share anything
Yeah.
else. You would die over the water. The beaches. I mean,
tempt me on
I
a
can
bucket trip.
officially say I've floated in the ocean of the Bermuda Triangle,
That's cool.
like in the
Aren't there
triangle.
some creepy things about the Bermuda Triangle, or like ships have gone missing and planes have gone missing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's that's all when I think of Bermuda or the Bermuda Triangle. Yeah.
There's like a weird energetic thing that happens there.
How did it feel there energy wise? Like, did it just feel like any cool tropical place, or did did something feel different?
It's hard because I was there filming.
Yeah.
So that
Hard to
in and
tune
of
into
itself is like a lot,
Yeah,
right? And
that's true.
Everyone knows that the cast trips is when everything goes down. So it's like heightened, like everything's heightened. But like there was just like a weird, like almost, we would talk about it being like this fog.
Oh yeah.
Like you just felt like time was weird. Things were weird. You couldn't like put things in order.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
Like you have to experience it probably to feel it.
Yeah, but we made it. Everyone made it in and out safely.
Well, that's good.
Nothing crazy with planes or anything like that. But yeah, thank you everyone for the patience. We skipped a week because we ended up losing one of our dear friends. Lost her fierce battle to cancer. So Connie and I decided to take that week off because we were celebrating her life.
Yeah, it was a lot, but we're back.
Yeah, we are back, and we are back in a big way. We our guest today is just like, how would you explain Jimmy Rex?
Gosh, he's so smart and interesting, and like he's just not afraid to do anything that is intriguing to him in this life.
Yeah, his confidence, he's when you say the name Jimmy Rex, you think of real estate here in Utah. He's really made a name for himself in real estate. He's written a few books, and he's recently started this men's group. And I think the real reason why we want to have him on is because Connie and I, we spend a lot of time working on ourselves. Our spirituality, our personal growth, our health, our wellness, our beauty, and like one of the biggest things we're noticing is that there's not really space for men to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. Like it's
not as common at all.
It's not as common for, a masculine man to get into his feelings and connection and really be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And Connie and I were out to dinner last night on a girls' night, and we were talking at dinner, and I shared with her something that my cousin, Courtney Osborne, she is a known feminist. She works really hard in a lot of women's movements and really does a lot to support women. She has her own charity, and she's well known. She's had a successful career here in the tech world in Utah, but she has pivoted and retired, and she's focusing on healing men men's health, men's mental health, men's spirituality, because through everything that she's learned, with all the work that she's done. I mean, she's my cousin. We have a lot of the same childhood traumas. We all grew up in this little bubble of Utah, right? Mm-hmm. So she shared with me that one of her biggest learnings was that women, like, one of the most profound ways that you can help women heal is to heal men.
Yeah.
So when she really dove into the details of like the work the research she's doing, all of that, it made so much sense. And so Jimmy, our friend, who has been very successful at this and has created
a beautiful space for men to navigate and figure out some really deep things that maybe they don't understand. We don't understand everything that's deep inside of us. So he's created a really cool dynamic space for men to navigate those things and figure out more so who they are authentically.
Yeah, it's called We Are the They, and we'll let him tell his story, but essentially he's created a men's group, a community that has strong core pillars of a safe place for men to go and to connect and be vulnerable and work through problems, learning how to communicate, all of these amazing, profound things that he's doing. So I think we will take a quick break, and when we come back, Connie will introduce Jimmy Rex.
Welcome back, everybody. Today we have a very special guest, a longtime friend of ours, of mine and Whitney's. Jimmy Rex is his name. He's not only a very, very successful realtor here in Utah, he has a big team, and he has his own podcast. He's an author. He's written a book. And have you just written one? Have you written two now?
Yeah.
I thought you wrote another one. Okay, we'll get into that. And recently, I guess over the last couple of years, he has a men's group that is focused on men's health and connection, which that's kind of what we wanted to dive into as well. So Jimmy, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so excited to have you here today. We actually want to just kind of get to know you, your story, where you started, because you actually went to BYU around the same time as our good friend Sherry, right?
I went to UVU, but I was in Provo.
So you were in Provo, yeah.
It's funny, BYU actually, I didn't get accepted into BYU, but they do have me come speak to their business school now. So that's kind of
Isn't that funny how that works?
Right? And make my dad proud one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's so much we want to talk about, but we'd love to just start by like your story. How did you get to where you are? You're a real estate how do you say that? Mogul.
In fact, that's how Ben and
Jimmy
I
Rex is his name. Real estate is his game. I was going to go off on a rap. You found a lot of success in real estate, an author, and now all the work you're doing with your men's group with healing, personal development, self-growth. So like how did someone from Utah branch out of the bubble we live in here and become what you are today?
Well, no, I appreciate that. It's, I laugh about it because I joke, like in Utah, I've done a really good job of everybody kind of knows who I am, right? And as a realtor, that's a next to impossible task. But when I first got into real estate, I said, when people think of me, I want them to think of real estate. And then after a few years, I said, no. When they think of real estate, I want them to think of me. And so I started building my brand with that in mind, right? And so I think a lot of people just get comfortable. And for me, I remember when I first got into real estate, I was 23 years old. And even in the real estate school, they said, only 2 of you will still have your license. I think 94% of realtors don't renew their license after 2 years. And so they're like, well, only 2 of you will still be doing this in 3 years, And I literally out loud, I'm like, well, who's the other one? And that was kind of my attitude. I wanted to, as soon as I got into real estate, I said, within 2 years, I want to be where it takes most agents to be in 20 years. And so I jumped into the mentoring. I really got into, I spent wasted a lot of money on marketing and different ideas. But in that, I kind of found what worked and what didn't. and with my early success in real estate, and I was just going to all these seminars and just trying to learn and grow. And I got a coach early on, and then I got another coach, and I was just really trying to, again, expedite that learning curve. I mean, the fun part about real estate is you can make so much money as an agent. And it's one of those careers where you never really get to a point where you stop progressing because there's always something more to do. So, at the peak of my career, I was the number one agent in the state that year. I one of the top in the entire area. And I went to ASU to go get my master's in real estate development. And people are like, what is he doing? Like this, he's like leaving. But that year, my team grew more than ever. And I learned how to grow my team not being there in the day-to-day. I had to, because I was literally going to be living in Arizona. And so by keep pushing myself and doing these different things, I always kind of wanted to do something else and something more as well as real estate. And so I remember about 4 years ago, I'd been selling real estate for, at the time, almost 15 years. And I sold the most expensive home ever in Utah. It was $32.5 million.
Damn.
I mean, this was I was literally the number one agent at the time in the state of Utah. And I just remember I had this epiphany. I was doing a meditation. I just realized, you know what? I need to do something more meaningful. Like, I'm kind of done with this real estate. Not done in the sense I don't want to do anymore, but I knew, and what had happened at the same time, there was a real estate agent named Dave Stocco in Utah, and he had gotten shot and killed collecting a rent check out of a fourplexing yard.
Oh my God, I remember that story.
Yeah, it was terrible. And in the news, every single story was like realtor shot, realtor killed, realtor. I mean, this guy had 7 kids. He had a bunch of other things that made him an amazing human. And I remember thinking, like, it really woke me up. I was like, if I die tomorrow and all I'm known as is a realtor, like, I'd be pissed. I'm like so much more than that. I have so much more potential to give to this universe. And so anyway, so it kind of started me down this path of figuring out what I was going to do next. And in that, I wrote, my book, You End Up Where You're Heading, The Hidden Dangers of Living a Safe Life. And it's all about taking the hero's journey and getting uncomfortable on purpose and, putting yourself in situations where you're forced to grow and go into the cave and cross the bridge and all those, metaphors that you hear. And in that, I said, I need to do this as well. Like, I've gotten very comfortable in real estate. I mean, I was working 25, 30 hours a week, making multiple 7 figures in real estate. I mean, it really took off after, 15 years of grinding. And so I got to that place, but I just was unfulfilled with it. And I knew I could do something else. And so I started kind of really leaning into it. And that book, a lot of people, I ended up selling a lot of copies, almost 20,000 copies of it. And a lot of people would reach out to me and, they'd read it and say, hey, this is where I feel like I feel like you were speaking to me in this book. And also my podcast had kind of taken off. And so people would hear me, with that. And the 2 questions that kept coming back, number one was people kept saying, you guys have the best group of friends. Like, I don't even know where to start to find a group of friends like that. And then the second thing that people would say is, I feel like I'm stuck in life. How do I get out of this place? And so for me, when it was like, okay, maybe I'll go into this coaching space. And I'd done some real estate coaching. I didn't like it. I'd done one-on-one coaching. And to be honest, I didn't like it. It was a lot of effort. But I'd kind of seen some of my friends do this model where they have this group coaching. And I was like, oh, I know how to help men connect though. Like, that is really what I mean. All my best friends have met through me.
Yeah, I've met through most of my networks. We're connected through most of my networks. Mm-hmm. Like, we hadn't actually met, but everyone was like, oh, do you know Jimmy Rex? Like, haven't met him yet, but you're like a connector and a networker for sure. Yeah.
And so that was what I kind of was like, I should teach other people. And what I realized, there were some stats. I started studying this. And, in 1990, I think the number was like 57% of men felt like they had a close group of guy friends. That number's down to like 27% today.
I believe it.
Right. And then 1 in 3 guys feels like they don't have a single close friend. And so I started going, geez. And I think I've kind of always just taken for granted that I had a lot of close friends. I mean, a lot of times at the expense.
Is that how you just always were? Did you grow up? Were you a very social kid?
I always put my friends in high regard. I always took a lot of pride in building that friendship. I just cared. Like, I just did. Like,
who taught you that? Was it self-taught?
I think so. Yeah. I think whatever, I had older brothers and siblings, and I always loved when they'd have their friends come over. So I think we just always had a social house and people over, and I really enjoyed that. And, by my nature, I'm very extroverted. And so for me, even in high school, I always put my friends first ahead of the girls. And I'd always, all the, hoes before bros, what the heck, and all that stuff that you say. But I meant it, like, it really mattered to me. And so.
You mean bros before hoes?
Yeah, you know what I mean. That's the whole thing. And so, like, even, I remember, like, when my friends started getting married, and they would kind of just like stop reaching out and kind of like always bothered me. I was like, dude, was I just a tool to help you find? Because I was really good at, they used to call me the initiator because I would just, any group of girls, I had this theory that if I saw a cute girl, I had to talk to her within 3 seconds, period. I didn't have a choice. Like I just took the guesswork out. If I saw a girl that I thought she was attractive, I was going to go talk to her. So I would open every freaking conversation for my friends. That's a good guy to have around, right? And usually by being some kind of jackass in some way. And so they would immediately just come over and they'd get the tailwind of what I was creating. And so,
in fact, I think one of the first times we hung out, we were going to a nightclub in Park City, and you had some gorgeous girl with you, and I'm like, who is this guy with this? Like, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it was just always something I would do. Well, and if I'm being real, like when I first started doing it, if 3 out of 10 gave me their number, I was like, hell yeah, I just got to talk to 10 girls. I got dates on Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
It's a numbers game, right?
Yeah, that's how I looked at it, right? I didn't care about the 7 that said no. I was like, oh, whatever.
Right. You're a numbers guy. I can tell. You tie everything back to a stat, and it has to make sense, right?
Well, but it's the logical brain, right?
Yeah. Well, before we go back to where we left off, where you're like started realizing that men, like only 27% now consider having like a close friend group. There's something that I've like a theme with you that I am picking up, and it's something I'm actively working on, and that's mentality. Like when you're talking about how your relationship with how you established your brand in real estate, like have you always just had this confidence and posture, or is that something that you learned?
No, I think
because it's something I'm trying to step into right now.
Yeah, I think I learned, and I've thought about this a lot. I think one of my biggest benefits that I had is from a young age, my parents did let me do what I wanted. I mean, we had 7 kids. To be honest, my dad drove like an 18-wheeler. My mom was a school teacher. They just didn't have time to micromanage me. And so for better or worse, I just got to be really free in what I wanted to do, right? And so I tried a lot of things. And then, when I got home from my LDS mission, I just wanted to go into business. And so I tried a meat company. I did a Christmas lights company. I did a TV show. I was doing all these different things. And to be honest, most of them by the end of it were either failures, you could say, quote unquote, or just weren't that, I didn't make any money off it, right? Or not that much. Like things happened that caused that. But so to the average person, like, oh, that was a failure. And to me, what I started seeing, so I'll give you an example, the TV show. We ended up becoming the #1 show on KJazz on Sunday nights. Like they picked up a second season. I ended up selling it to these guys. I was supposed to get a percentage of the profits, but they didn't make any profits, so I really didn't get any money. So you could say I gave it to them, I guess, at that point. But
it was an experience.
Yes, but all these things that like people would be like, oh, that must have been a failure. But what I saw was the way people treated me and respected me for doing the thing. So like my meat company, I started this meat company. I franchised it. I had all these employees. I was 23 years old. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. For part of the time, I wasn't even collecting sales tax. I had no idea you were supposed to. Like all my profit went to paying the government back, and all these different things. But so like to the average person, then my partner ended up stealing our money, and I got stuck with over $100,000 of debt at age 24. But I saw the way people treated it, and it was like they had so much respect because I was trying things. So even though it was a quote unquote failure, I started learning to fall in love with the failure. It was like, fine. Like the real failure was to not try. And, I read recently in Lewis Howes' new book, I just had him on my podcast. And so we were talking about this, but Sarah Blakely, she invented Spanx, the first self-made billionaire woman under 30. I mean, incredible human being. Her parents would ask her every day when she came home from school, what did you fail at today? And so I associated, similar to what she had, I just started seeing like, wow, like if I try this, like we are so afraid of how we're going to be judged by the outcome of something, but no one really cares. They don't remember if you like tried something that didn't work. It's not like, oh my gosh, you guys aren't going to believe this. This thing didn't work. It's like props for them for trying, And so I think I got my confidence in every single thing that I did. I just started seeing that like people respected me more and they looked up to me, and I was learning so fast because you can learn 20 times faster if you're in the trenches doing something as opposed to studying about it. And so for me, I think that's where that confidence came from, is like, even with, the girls that said no, well, I had every pretty girl in town for the most part was either a friend, because I knew how to turn that conversation if she didn't want to go out into a friend real quick. Like you're hitting on a pretty girl and all of a sudden she's like, oh, I'm in a relationship. I'd say something like, okay, well, do you have a sister that looks exactly like you, or some shit like that, right? And then they'd laugh their ass off like, you're funny, let's be friends, blah, blah, blah. Or I'd go up to the tallest girl, even because I had a rule, I had to go talk to him. I'd go up to a girl, she's 6 feet tall, beautiful girl. I'm 5'9", nothing's going to happen here. But I'd go up and I'd just go, hey, love everything about you, especially that you're tall, because you're going to be my perfect decoy. You got to come to my party. It's on Friday night. I'm going to have you there because a lot of the guys are going to focus on you, so I can go get the short girl. It's more my style. And they just laughed their ass off, and we like really became friends. And so I would just use these different things, and all of a sudden, like, people were like, man, Jimmy's goes out with every cute girl in town. What they didn't know is the 6 that said no, they just saw the ones that I was actually hanging out with. And so as you start to kind of develop this confidence in just having failures and having things not go your way, but they still working for you. And I think that's where that confidence came from.
And that's something I'm really, really working on right now.
Yeah, people get in their heads. They're like,
Yeah.
we think like here's what I tell people, especially like with your podcast as an example, okay? Like, let's just worst case scenario, it's a train wreck, okay? You know all about this. You're on Real Housewives, okay?
Yes.
Your best odds are that the podcast is so bad that it goes viral. Like, otherwise, it's just bad. And it's not like people are like, oh, this thing's horrible. They just move on. There's so many things that capture your attention. Mm-hmm. So if you make a TikTok and nobody watches it, people aren't like, oh my gosh, this guy has the worst TikToks ever. They just flip up to the next thing. Their attention span is literally 2 seconds, you know? And so
unless you're in my position, then people broadcast it and it does go viral. So it's like, is there a such thing as bad publicity?
I mean, there is if you do something really bad. But like,
I know,
but not usually.
One of my, on the TikTok things, one of my TikToks went viral because they were making fun of me. Mm-hmm. But I was like, wow, it got like 700,000.
I'll get in. No, same thing for me. I get asked to speak. I just came from a speaking gig. Like literally, that's where I just came from. And I get asked to speak 30 to 40 times a year, you know. And I usually say yes. I used to say yes to everything. Last year, a kid basically was like, hey, here's who I got speaking at my event. I got Brad Lee. I got Dan Fleischman. I got Aaron Wagner. Will you come up and speak too? And I'm like, yeah, sure. It was a great lineup, you know. I had no idea. I thought it was an entrepreneur conference. I end up speaking. But before we spoke, this freaking flyer comes out and it's 10 white guys on a flyer and it says AlphaCon. And I'm like, oh my God. The second I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. And sure enough, I mean, it went viral for all the wrong reasons. And to this day, I mean, people don't really have anything to come at me at for. Like, my thing's really beautiful. The thing I've created, the thing that I do, you know, when I speak, I come from my heart. And so people try to attack me for this AlphaCon, like, fraud thing, basically, you know. And I'm like, I was literally a speaker that didn't even get paid. I was just trying to help this kid. So, like, there was quote unquote negative publicity, but I always turn it, like, when these people try to make fun of me, like, there was a guy that made this YouTube video, and I'll be honest, it's freaking genius. It's hilarious. He's like ripping all of us. And, you know, he takes his whacks at me, and I just hit him up like, dude, sincerely, you're good. And it was freaking funny, dude. And he's like, wow, thanks, man. He's like, I actually was looking at you. He's like, it was hard to find shit on you. And, you know, and it was like, and it was just turned into a positive. But like, people get so caught up in, you know, here's one thing I know, like, happy people don't go on the internet and criticize people they don't know. I'll tell you that. Right. And so when people are coming at you on the internet, there is room to just go, they're all good. Like, they're just not happy, you know, like, God bless them. They need a hug. And when you can look at it that way, it's no longer this crazy offensive thing. Like, you go viral for the wrong reasons. Like that AlphaCon thing, it just bugged the hell out of me because it was like, I had nothing to do with it, but people just associated it with us. And to our own fault, like, it did look horrible. And so anyway.
Yeah. But again, your intention was to go help a kid. But let's take a quick break. When we come back from the break, can we go back to where we were just getting to the good stuff, when your men's group?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Welcome back from the break. We have Jimmy Rex. Jimmy, we get distracted. Connie and I can go down like any different, like, what is it called? Like rabbit holes. Yeah. We just love to talk and get to know people.
Love it.
But let's pick up where, like, you were talking about, so you had all of your experience in real estate. You wrote your book and you realized that you wanted to do something. Money, like, wasn't it. You wanted something more meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I'd invested in a tech company too that at one point, you know, was worth over $30 million. Everyone knew this story, Nikola Motors, and I rode that wave up and down. So I had this chance. There was summer of 2020, June 9th, that day, the stock shot through the moon. It ended up becoming worth more than Ford. I was one of the seed round investors, so my stock was worth tens of millions of dollars, like crazy. I was never gonna have to worry about money again. And I was locked up, so I couldn't touch the equity. But come December, I was gonna be able to sell it. And literally, so I spent 4 or 5 months going through, even though every morning I'd wake up and I either made or lost like $1 million. It was a wild time, trust me. And then in September, it came out, the Hindenburg report, there was some fraud and 65% of the value crashed. And so it was like, oh, but I got to play this game in between where I really got to go, hey, like money's not going to be an issue anymore. What do you want to do with your life? What do you truly want to do? It was such a gift because I realized like I'm doing 95% of what I would want to do. I'd want to just do a little bit less real estate and more just like helping men connect and like just creating amazing experiences. And so that's what I did. I created We're the They. And what it is it's basically a program to help men. We have 3 pillars: be vulnerable, authentic, and in integrity. And where that comes from is, a couple of years back, I was, when I went through my faith transition with growing up Mormon and everything, and was trying to find myself really. And, there's just a lot of things you have to work through. And I remember I was talking to my life coach, and she said, Jimmy, you're most lovable when you're vulnerable, authentic, and in integrity. And so I wrote that on my wall. I just always had that. And so it's true, because what happens is when we're not being authentic, when we're not being our real selves, then if people love us, we know instinctively that they love a version of us they're getting. It's not actually us they love. If you're not being vulnerable, then what happens is with the right people, you don't want to be vulnerable with everybody, but with the people that deserve to be vulnerable with, especially like your spouse or whatever, and kind of the same as like being in integrity, is if you are off, like if there's things that you haven't shared that you probably need to, or you've been, living a double life or just done some things that maybe you're ashamed of, then anytime people are pouring into you, so I'll give you an example. I have a guy in my group, and he said, dude, I've never been able to celebrate a day of my life. This guy's in his late 30s. And when he joined the program, he said, I, discovered porn as a kid, and I've looked at it every day since. Never told my family, never told my parents, never told my wife. Every week goes to church and gets told he shouldn't do it, but he's like, this is a problem I've always had. And he said, I've never been able to celebrate a single moment of my life because every time I was being celebrated for something, all I could think of was if they really knew who I was, they wouldn't love me. He just had so much shame around this. And so what we teach people to do, whatever it is, right? Like we had a guy in our last get together a couple of weeks ago, got up and he admitted that he was sexually molested as a kid. And he said, these words have never come out of my mouth. I've never told a soul. He'd never told his wife. He'd never told anybody. And so now he starts that healing process. And what happens is when you do that, so we had another guy that, he was a bodyguard and he, for a big time rapper, and he'd go on the road with him all the time, and he'd go to these strip clubs, and his wife did not know and was not okay with that. And so when he kind of finally, after about 4 or 5 months in the program, went home to his wife and talked to her about it and told her essentially, and he said for 4 hours, she wouldn't talk to me. She was hurt. She was mad. Then she came up. She started cuddling me and she said, hey, thank you for telling me, like, I love you. And he said, Jimmy, for the first time in my life, I know my wife actually loves me. And that's the gift of vulnerability. That's the gift of getting into an integrity. You don't have to, you don't have this bucket with holes in it. Like when people feed into you, you can fill it and you can accept it. And to have a group of men that support you, like there's no judgment around it. There's no, there's no feelings of shame and guilt and things like that. But it's true support from a group of men that are all doing the same thing. Then you have what you need to truly make that change.
Yeah, because I love it because, so my cousin, Courtney Osborne, I'm going to quote her. She is well known in the tech space. She's been CMO. She's had a very successful career with many tech companies here. She's retired and she's working on a men's project as well because she believes that, we focus on women. It's easier for us to connect.
Yeah, Whitney and I were just talking about this last night.
Yeah, like it's easier for us to be vulnerable. For us.
Yeah, men have to hold, they have to be protectors, they have to be providers, they have to be all these different things. And so they don't think it's okay not to be okay.
Well, what Courtney said to me, she's like, I should have written down the direct quote. I popped into my head this morning, but essentially what she was saying is like the best thing you can do for a woman is to heal the man. Like, so she's a feminist and she does all of this work and for women. And so people are giving her a bad rap right now because she's focused on men. But she's like, when you pivot the mindset of the best thing you can do for a woman is to help the man heal. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. So that's what her work is focused on right now too. I don't know exactly what she's doing at this point, but Connie and I, that hit me hard because Connie and I have spent so much time, money, effort of overcoming our own traumas, healing, finding our confidence, our power.
But for some reason, it's so hard for men to be vulnerable enough to reach out, and also not knowing where to reach out or who to reach out to. That's why it's so important that it's becoming so much more accepted and talked about. Like, it's okay for men to not be okay. And I heard actually a good friend of mine just said, he said this to me the other day. He said, vulnerability is the new masculinity. And I thought, actually, you're right, because there's nothing attractive about a man that's like all macho and like, he's holding a bunch of shit in. If he's acting all tough all the time, like, that's just not human. It's, you know.
That's exactly what I was going to say is, so I've done all this work, but then I go to share it and connect and I can't.
Yeah, that's what what I tell you is like, vulnerability is a superpower, because the second you anytime, like, and I actually, so I have men in the group that are a little bit more shy, right? And you will never be in a safer room to connect with other men. Like, everybody there wants the same thing. Everybody there is willing to accept you. And I had at the last event, I said, stand up if you still feel like you're not connecting as deep as you want to with the men. Stand up. I said, all right, guys, there's about 5 or 6, a handful out of 50, 60. I said, listen, I'm going to give you a script that's going to take away all the fear of connecting with other men. I said, here's what you're going to say. You're going to go up to them. You're going to say, hey, my name's whatever, Matt, right? I'm terrified right now to talk to you because this is very uncomfortable for me. I'm trying to make friends. I'm not very good at it. The vulnerability of that, immediately the guy's like, dude, come here, let me take you in, right? And that's like, we think that's so weak to be like, but when you actually do that, when you're like, hey, like, to be honest, like, and I always get up and I share things with the guys that I'm struggling with or that I'm dealing with. And, I had one recently, I had this huge breakthrough with like this wound I had from my childhood with my mom. And I never knew it was even there until I started working with this new coach. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, and I shared it, I like shared it with the group as kind of a share session. And 3 or 4 other dudes was like, dude, that like cracked something open for me with my mom. And then all of a sudden it's safe to like share things. And so the one thing I never wanted to be was the leader that gets up there and is like, look, be like me. I got all my shit together. It's like, when people try to come at me, guys in my group will tell me, people be like, that guy he's single. Like, what do you learn from a 41-year-old bachelor who's never been married? And they're like, dude, the beauty of Jimmy is like, he knows he doesn't have all this shit together. Like, that's what makes this so special. And I bring in specialists. Like, we're actually covering romantic relationships right now. I've brought in some of the smartest dudes in the world and women in the world to like cover the issue, because I'm like, hey, last thing I'm going to do is come in here and tell you how to run your marriage. It's like, although I've studied it, I've learned a lot, like there's something about having that experience, but ultimately that vulnerability of just going, man, I'm honestly not sure here. And it's really one of the smartest things you can tell people. One of the things that helped me a lot in real estate, I got really good at saying, I don't know. I think too many people are so afraid to say that. And so like when people would ask me questions about real estate and I didn't know, I just go, honestly, I have no idea. Let me find out. But all of a sudden they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like, go find out. Like, you don't have to know everything. And so I just, for me, like you said, for women, the best thing you can do is heal your man. In a lot of ways, that's so true. And for same thing with men, when I started coaching the men, I did realize, I was like, oh, shoot. If I don't have something for the wives and girlfriends to come along, like there's going to be a gap, right? And so I brought in my life coach, Melissa. She's a Tony Robbins coach for 22 years, just an incredible human, and brought her in, and she runs the Queen's Edition now. So we have over 150 women now, in the wives and girlfriends part of this course that's for them. It has nothing to, it's not like, here's how you can be a better wife. It's absolutely, here's for you. Like, it has nothing to do with the men. As they get themselves better, they elevate together. And that's really, the genius of what you guys were saying is you really have to do it together.
You have to grow together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always say you don't have to be on the same page, but you have to be in the same book at all times.
That's fair. Yeah. Like, or at least trying to read the same book, right?
Yeah. Like, at least be in the same, like, genre. Because that is the gap. That is, and honestly, like, as women, we talk about it all the time. It's like what you were saying earlier, like you could be the full package on the outside, but if you can't connect and open up, like women have to connect to have romance and intimacy. Yeah. Well, and men have to have sex to connect usually.
Yeah, they have
like
to have
what they're
respect
taught.
And some of these things, physical intimacy and all
so
those
things. So I love
things.
that we're changing we're realizing that narrative no longer serves us. It's not
somebody said
fake.
The other day to me, they said, dude, you need to IP all of your stuff because people are going to start copying you. And I was like, dude, I can't manage many more guys than I've got. I was like, the truth is I need people to copy this and run with it. Like if somebody else wants to do this with their own spin on it, knock yourself out. Like this is how we heal the world and become a better place. And, and I'm not naive to think that I'm the only one that can do this. And so it's like, for me, it's like, no, this is, if I can start a movement, if I can create, and it's happening, like people, they were talking about me on a couple of the biggest podcasts in the world the other day, Logan Paul's podcast and some of these other ones where it's like the message is getting out. It's like, hey, it can be cool to actually have men be able to express their feelings and work on themselves and heal themselves. And yet we stay in our masculine and we still, create that container that's safe for the women. It's the opposite of toxic masculinity, but it is masculinity. And it's that true masculinity where you take off your mask, like you were speaking to, where you're a little vulnerable, and you actually really do stand for something that's different.
Well, one of my good friends is in your program, and his wife does my eyebrows. And I was getting my eyebrows done just a couple of days ago. And he came in and we were chit-chatting, and he's like, well, I'm going to go, it's time for me to have my 45 minutes to myself. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to go ride my motorcycle. And then I think I'm going to go build something. And I was like, what? Because I did not know this man to be like handy at all. Okay. And he's like, yeah, I joined a men's group, and right now is my time to go meditate. And I'm going to meditate on my motorcycle today. And I was like, okay. I know exactly what group you're in.
Hell yeah. I love it.
So we went down a whole path of and she's joined the Queen's program, and it's really interesting to see just in a short period of time the difference that they communicated to each other, the way that they interacted. Because last night we went on a girls' night, and I would say probably 90% of husbands get weird when women want to go out on a girls' night, because in their mind it's a different narrative. For us, it's we just want to
get with our girlfriends and connect
and that having an outlet for men where they realize it's safe. Because my biggest thing with my husband, I'm like, go hang out with your friends, go do something. I'm fine, go golf, go.
I'm always encouraging Ben to go do that too. And he's like, but I'd rather just be with you. And I'm like, no, I get that. And I love that.
For sure. But that's also, too much pressure on us too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's important to have connection and have close people.
Yeah. It's, I think people undervalue just how important it is to have that support system, right? You're going to show up as a better husband, a better friend, a better son, a better brother, all those things if you have a healthy outlet to be able to talk about stuff and be able to share things. And so, whether it's a men's group or women going out, and, historically, there's just, if that's caused them pain in the past, then you have to talk through that. And that's where the communication. And one thing I've learned with this group is a lot of couples or a lot of people, they don't lack love. They lack the actual skills needed to help each other. And so one of the things I'm really big on is teaching the skills, like how to hold space, how to communicate correctly, how to, one example is I had a buddy, his wife wanted to go on a girls' trip to Cancun with some friends, and it triggered him hard, and he was like, I don't trust these friends, this and that. And it was funny because he was totally in his, and she's like a saint, he had nothing to worry about. But as they finally communicated about it, and he was able, he talked to me about it, and he's like, dude, what do you think? I was like, tell her what you're telling me, the truth. He'd been cheated on before by a woman that went to a women's group or a girls' trip, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, what do you need to feel safe? As you're communicating through it, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh my gosh, go, duh. And it was such an easy, but he had to have that little healing, and he had to be able to speak his truth, where all of a sudden his wife is like, oh my gosh, let me do what I can to make you feel safe. It's no longer he's being an asshole. He just is hurt. And when you can kind of turn that and see it for what it is, all of a sudden both people get to have the experience in a way that makes them feel safe, makes them feel seen, makes them feel comfortable. And so that communication, those skills that people lack, I think that's a big part of it for a lot of people.
And when you understand your partner's vulnerabilities, and like you said, it's not the lack of love, you love them. So when you understand their vulnerabilities, I think that you learn to protect them even more so than they do. So it's just that communication and letting them know and being vulnerable and saying, okay, this is what this is making me feel like. otherwise you're left in the dark and you're just like, you're just being a dick or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Assumption is the worst place to be.
Yeah, for sure. So a big thing I think that we see too, like we were saying, we kind of go back to this, but like women have been maybe doing this a little longer. It's maybe a little more natural for us to work on ourselves and our spirituality and our growth that way. Not all of us, but I think more so women than men. But
Jimmy probably has a stat for it.
You probably do.
But I will say, like, women are naturally going to be better at a lot of those things. Yes.
So I find that also, like, when you do so much healing and growth, that if your partner is not also doing something in that direction, that you really grow apart. And it can create this space where it's like, now I'm over here and like we can't even communicate these things because you don't understand them, because you've never really worked on those things, and I can't do that for you. You're like, you know, we all have to kind of come to our own conclusion of like, do we want to, I don't know, like find like why, what am I trying to say?
Like, you have to do
your
it for
wife and want to
yourself.
do it for yourself.
Yeah.
But there is
Yeah.
so again, there's a skill in this though. So for me with the men, I have to train them and teach them how to go home and inspire their wife instead of telling their wife what they need. Because what a lot of people do is they go to a conference, whether it's guys or people will do this in work, right? They go to a real estate conference, come home, and they just spill all this stuff on their team. They're like, we're going to do all this now. Like, and their team's like, they weren't there to get energized and motivated. So they're just kind of like, oh shit, here we go again, you know? And then like they see the person revert back to their old form within a couple of weeks and all these different things. And so I think, you know, one of the things I have to do is I have to remind the men, like, hey, you need to communicate with your wife what's happening, why it's important, and then inspire them, because you can't change anybody. That's one thing I've learned with this program. All you can do is you can inspire people to change, and you can create a container safe enough for them to expedite that change. But you can't change anybody. And all frustration in life is when you are needing people to show up a different way. If you have an expectation for how they're supposed to be, you're just going to be left feeling frustrated because people are not going to act the way you want. So all I can do, even as the leader of this group, is try to inspire change and then try to create a container safe enough for them to want to do that. But that's pretty much all I can do. The rest is up to the person. And a lot of times in a marriage or a relationship, you know, if you're doing the work, it's going to inspire the partner. But if you say you're doing the work, but you're still being an asshole, or you're going to the program every week, but you're showing up worse, like they're gonna be like, you're a fraud, like, you know. And so it really is. I go on a walk every morning with one of my guys. That's when I do my one-on-one coaching. I was talking to one guy this morning, and him and his wife have really been struggling for years now, and he wants to really get it right. And I said, look, dude, she's going to change if you change. And there's a book, it's the best book for men ever written. It's called The Way of the Superior Man by a guy named David Dita. He actually coached me one-on-one last year. I hired him for a while, and incredible. But the whole premise of the book is like, so many men are like, oh, once this happens, then it'll get easier. It's like wanting it to get easier. It's never going to get easier, because that's the natural dance of life, and the masculine and the feminine. And so what he teaches in the book, and which I, you know, help people understand, is like, look, it's never going to get easier. You simply are going to learn how to work that game. But as you work on yourself, it is up to the man to inspire the people in his life to come along with him. And if your woman is not on board with the way you are, or she's intermasculine or whatever that might be, it's probably because you're not showing up the way you need to. And so that's where you take extreme ownership, and you're able to, because of the way, you know, when you realize, okay, if I do these things, one of two things will happen. You'll either inspire that person to get, you know, change as well, or you grow apart, and then you go find a person that's a better fit.
Yeah, I know that book well. Justin has read it and listened to it. And I remember getting into the Tesla, and I'd be playing, and I'm like, what is this?
I need to get this book for Ben and my son Josh.
Yeah, but on the opposite side, as a woman, I mean, people reach out to me all the time asking for advice, how to. Common theme is, if as a spiritual woman, a woman who is devoted to personal growth, for the most part, I'd say Connie and I both are. Like, we love it. And how do you inspire the man?
Yeah, I mean, same thing, right? I mean, Tony Robbins talks about this
Because
quite
clearly I'm not doing it right.
I think you probably are. I don't know.
Probably
I don't know
are.
your marriage, but I don't know where you started at, right?
Yeah,
Like, where were
well,
you?
no, I mean, yeah, just...
Y'all seem to be healthy enough, so...
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, this is for our listeners too, because a lot of people ask me, like, how did you do this? How did you get here? And I honestly, that is the one thing I can't answer, is how to inspire someone else.
Well, the truth is, it's a lot of damn work. Like, you do the work. And by the way, not everybody's going to like the changes you make, because some people, they need you to show up a certain way in their lives, or else it's going to make them uncomfortable, right? Like, one thing that I do is I put a mirror in front of people. I know this because they tell me all the time, like, I used to hate you. I didn't even know you. I just hated you. But ultimately, it'll come out like something along the lines of like, I can tell you're just living. You're like, you really don't care what people think. And I'm like, well, I do. I just have learned to push past that, right? And to like do it anyways, because I want what I want more than I care what some random ass thinks of me. And so I think the way to inspire other people is to live an exceptional life, to really be happy and to actually do the work. It's a lot of work. Like, all the stuff we do, it's really hard work. Most people don't do it. It's easier to coast through life. It's easier to not pay attention. But I mean, it's like, pick your heart, it's hard to not be happy. It's hard to not have a great relationship. It's hard to be poor. It's hard to be overweight. Or you do the hard work, which is, you be hard on yourself and you really work on yourself all the time. And then those other things just come easily. And so I think the way you inspire people is simply by the way you live, by the way you show up.
And I think sometimes we think that like, oh, because I'm living this way and they're watching me, that maybe there's like this sort of expectation of, oh, they're going to do X, Y, Z, but really they're just doing X. You're just not paying attention. Like they're doing some work. It might not be as quick or fast as what you're thinking, but you may not even notice it, but they're shifting too, because I've seen this with my own husband. I've seen, as I've kind of dived in, I've done some different like plant medicine journeys and things like that. And he's very, open, and he's willing to try things, because as he watches me do it, he's like, oh, wow, this is doing something for you. Like, maybe it could do something for me. And I've just watched him kind of slowly open up and soften the edges. And
and I've had people that like belittled me for a decade, and then all of a sudden they call me bawling. They're like, dude, you gave me the courage I needed to make these changes. Like, I'm so grateful. So sorry that I was an asshole. I'm like, it's all good. And you don't even know that. Yeah, it's like, okay. Everyone's on a time frame,
No, Connie's so right, because one day Justin came home with a crystal around his neck. And I'm into stones. I'm into finding meaning in things, having reminders and setting intentions. And he came home with a crystal around his neck. I'm like, what? Because he's never been into it. I have my crystal Bible right there, and he's just always kind of been like, oh, Whitney and her rocks,
woo-woo.
But you're right, Connie. It's like noticing those subtle things. And when I asked him about it, he said he picked it because he wants to work on his communication. And that crystal focuses on the throat chakra, your voice. So, so maybe I need to just like slow down and pay attention. Yeah. But no, this is mostly for other people. Like, how do you inspire someone to change? That's really hard to do, because they have to want to do it themselves.
Yeah, no, they do. And, I think about, I just reverse engineer. All right, who inspired me? And, I have these little moments in time. Like, I had a coach when I was 12, pulled me aside and gave me some really tough love. We lost a baseball game, and I was probably the best player on that team. And I was yelling at the other kids. And I remember he pulled me aside after the game, and I had a really good game personally, but I was yelling at the other kids, and pulled me aside behind the dugout, and he says, you know what, man? He's like, you're the best player on the team. And I'm just sitting there like, yeah, I'm cool, whatever. And he goes, but what does it matter? Everyone hates you. He's like, you make it hard for these guys to even want to have fun to come. He's like, just think of how you can be a better friend to them. And obviously I remember it was 25 years ago. I'm sitting here telling you about it right now, right? I'm like, holy shit, he's right. That was an inspiring moment. I remember when I was 21 and I watched Sean Nelson, is the dude that created Lovesac. I remember going to an event, and that dude was on the Rebel Millionaire. And I remember going to this event where they watched it and seeing what he had created. And I remember being so inspired. I was like, holy crap. And that dude I've never met him to this day. But he inspired the hell out of me to like want to do something more with my life. And then it was the first time I heard, certain stories. Like, you hear about the first guy that ran the 4-minute mile, and you're like, touches you, and you're like, okay, that's what it looks like. And then you hear these other, so you never know where you're inspiring. And so I think ultimately, I look for opportunities why I would agree to come on a podcast. One person might listen to this and be like, wow, Jimmy said this, and that was the moment, that things changed for me. And so, because it really is that simple and that subtle sometimes. And so I think it's just a reminder to always be just trying to push and do the best you can, finding fulfillment wherever you're at, like really enjoying the life that you've built, and letting other people go, you know what? That's what I want it to look like.
Well, and if I'm hearing you correctly, it's being in integrity. So telling your partner, I want to change, I want to grow. Are you coming with me or not?
Yeah, and maybe it's even deeper. Maybe it's like, hey, here's what I haven't been doing as a husband or as a wife. Here's where I've fallen short, and getting real honest about it, or hey, here's some things that are pretty shitty I've never told you, but it's kind of holding me back, and I'm done with that. I want to energetically remove those blocks between us, and let's get to a real beautiful state. And so it just depends, whatever it looks like.
So with just in a basic level, can you give us, because we don't want to take your entire day from you.
Because we probably would.
Time well spent. I like it.
I mean, there's so many avenues we could go down with all the interesting things that you're doing with your life.
Yeah,
and it's inspiring to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know that.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just curious, can you give us a little sneak peek on just a basic level what you're teaching? Like, I know you have different layers to your course, right? Because I've seen some stuff on Instagram through Dr. Nicholas Hallen. He's been on the podcast. And I was like, holy shit, what is he doing? Why is he doing that? So I know that there's different levels, and he's progressed far into the program, right?
Yeah.
So at a basic level, what are you teaching?
There's 5 pillars that everything involves around these 5 things. Okay. And this is really the genius of my program, if I'm being honest. Number 1 is you have to take a moral stand. That's getting into integrity. That means if you're lying in your life, you got to freaking stop. If you're stealing, you got to freaking make it right and stop it. If you're sleeping around, you got to stop. You got to talk to the people you need to talk to. If you are just having an emotional affair with someone at work and sending energy to them, and your wife's nagging you because she's intuitive and picking up on it, it's time to fucking stop, right? Like, take a moral stand. Like, truly take a. I'll give you an example. We have a group thread with one of the groups for my men's group. And the other day, the guy made a joke on there, and it was a very innocent joke. On a scale of 1 to 10, it was like a 1. But to me, it was like, we stand for something different. This is going to be the way I show up in life. And so I'll even tell you the joke. Like, the guys are pretty funny. I got on the group call. We do a call every week, and all 50 of them had their shirts off. It was freaking funny, right? The call's at like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whatever. So like 7 p.m., one of the dudes drops in the thread. He goes, hey, can we put our shirts back on now? It's just funny, right? And then another guy said, yeah, I heard the women are going to take their shirts off on the call next. And I said, stop, respect women. We don't talk like that, period. And he was like all kind of butthurt for a second. We ended up going on a walk and talking about it. And I said, dude, I wasn't offended, and you shouldn't have said it, because the women are expecting so much more of what it looks like to truly protect them and honor them. I was like, if only 10% of the women would be offended by that, is it too high? I would say yes. Like, at what point do we just not do that? And your mind still went there, which was sexualizing women, which they get everywhere from society. So it's just taking a moral stand. That's number 1. Just take a moral stand. That's what it looks like, right? Like, that's really, and it's, again, you're not perfect. The guy's not in trouble. It's just like, hey, when you screw up, you do better. Number 2 is you got to change your behavior. I mean, we all, if we're being honest with ourselves, if you just stop and go, what are the 2 or 3 things I need to stop doing? And what's the 1 or 2 things I need to start doing? It's not hard to figure it out. We all know. Maybe it's just sleeping with your phone next to you. Maybe it's freaking texting at the dinner table. Maybe it's smoking, maybe whatever. You know what I mean? Like, we all know those things, but changing your behavior. 3 is having accountability often. You have to have some kind of real accountability. Like, half of my program is just being accountable to the other guys. Like, you get on the calls, you're talking to each other, we do these things. It's just that accountability. The 4th one is having a community that supports you, that you can count on. That's where, again, I've built all these things into my program, because this is where real change takes place. And then the 5th one is finding a mentor. In the group, there's mentors within the group. There's me. There's the people I bring on as guests. I've brought on Andy Frisella and Ed Milet, some of the biggest guys out there, But it's finding a mentor. Never been easier than 2023. They're everywhere. But finding somebody who has a life that you're like, damn, I love the way that person's doing it. And then you model the behaviors and the actions that they take to do that. And then you build these habits around that. And if you have those 5 pillars, that you can make real change. You can do about whatever you're trying to. And so in my program, those are the 5 pillars. And then I threw on top of it my own special sauce, which is I really do a lot of things to make them very uncomfortable, because I believe that most people get stuck in life because they just aren't used to exercising that muscle where they step through the uncomfortable things. So we've gone and we've swam with tiger sharks. We're going to go climb with the gorillas in Uganda. I've had them jump off 280-foot cliffs. I had them do combo, which is a frog poison you put on your arm. I've had them get up and share their things they've never shared before, like just, all these things that terrify you. I just put them through a POW camp 2 weeks ago where they literally got waterboarded and tortured.
I was going to bring that up because I saw that.
That's
I was
what I
like,
was
what
alluding
the
to.
hell is going on?
I got plenty of people coming at me like, what the hell's wrong with you? You can't do this. But if you talk to the guys, there was one guy that broke. He was literally crying and hugging one of the other guys. And I was like, oh shit, we've taken this too far, but then he got up and shared later on, like, it was actually really cool. He got back in the fight. He kept going and he realized, he said, I thought that I had broke. He said, he has a sciatic nerve in his leg. He's like, no, I physically, and he fainted. He literally passed out. He goes, I went to the point of pain that I passed out. He's like, but mentally I'm there. Like, and it actually was this breakthrough that he's needed for years. And he knows now that he's mentally strong enough to do whatever he needs to do. Even Nick, who you spoke of, had one of his biggest breakthroughs he's ever had in that moment. And you have to stress people in different ways. You have to put them in positions that's actually is uncomfortable. It's one thing to be like, oh, it's uncomfortable or whatever. No. When you're facing the 280-foot cliff and you have to jump and there's a rope that my buddy's tied up yesterday that's going to catch you, that's the only thing keeping you from splat. It takes a little bit of guts to jump off the cliff, And so my point is like, I've just organized and engineered this in a way to truly make them uncomfortable in every way possible. And every time they exercise that muscle and they push through it, those other 5 pillars get easier and easier.
This is reminding me of Ben was a Marine, and he's told me a lot about boot camp and stuff. And I'm like, gosh, this is like military stuff, like training your brain, your mind that you are stronger than you think that you are. And like you said, like getting stuck. We all get stuck. And we think, oh, it's as far as I can go. And you're like, no, actually, you have a lot more in you. There is a stat for that. Like when you
for
think,
sure. Well,
that
David
you're
Goggins
finished,
says, when you think you're done, you probably have 90% left. You're done.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
And I will say the one thing we do different than the military, because I agreed, and we bring military aspects in, but I think the military unfortunately has to desensitize you a little bit so you can actually stare across the barrel of a guy and shoot him and not feel bad about it. Whereas we're trying to go the opposite, like not desensitize, but like go deeper into our feelings and emotions and stuff. So that is one difference, I thought.
That's a big difference.
And like masculinity, you have to go to those extremes sometimes to break it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, a true masculine man, and, Jordan Peterson talks about this, is so true, though. I mean, it's being able to absolutely be a savage and to destroy, but you choose not to. Like, that's a healthy masculine man. Like, the most dangerous person out there is a man that doesn't have that healthy masculinity, where he either is dangerous or knows he's a wimp or all those different things. Like, those things are where all the worst men are actually cowards in some way or another. And so when you can get yourself to a place where if I needed to, I could turn that on, and I just choose not to every day. Like, that's true healthy masculinity.
Wow.
I'm just processing all this.
I know. Well, my friend that I mentioned earlier when I was getting my eyebrows done, I don't know if it's from your program, but he recommended the book, The Power of One More.
Yeah. That's my mentor, Ed Milet. So he's my one-on-one coach.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I ordered that book on Amazon. It's going to arrive tomorrow. Just because that concept of when you think, for me, it's what you just said, Connie, when you think you've pushed as far as you can go, but really you have 99%. It was
90% of your gains are going to come in those last 2 reps, right? Like whether it's weightlifting or whether it's in work, whatever it is. Like, my people are like, Jimmy, why were you so much better than everyone else at real estate? I'm like, the truth is I just called more people than everyone else. When everyone else was doing an hour, I was doing 3. When everybody else quit at 5, I went till 7. You know what I mean? It's that power of doing more. That's where all the gains come. It really is.
Well, wow. That's a lot. Where can everyone, are you taking?
We are,
the
program's open now.
Yeah.
Yep. And so wattmovement.com, so that's WATT, which stands for We Are the They, movement.com. They can apply there. And where my goal is, we just crossed over about 300 guys that I'm coaching now. And the goal is to get to 2,000 by the end of the year. And, a lot of the leaders that have been in the program now for 18 years, like one of my guys, he has his own group now that that I'm co-leading with him. And because the real growth, a true leader is how many other great leaders you can create and help become great leaders. And so that's really where I'm focused. And so, this thing has the potential to grow exponentially. And
so this isn't just in Utah. This is
worldwide.
No,
2/3 of our members are outside of Utah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff you do when you have these calls and stuff, they're all online.
So we have a weekly call every week. Depends on what group you're in, what time your call's at. And then we have events. We have 2 annual events. So we just had one. We had Erwin McManus come talk to us, The Way of the Warrior. He wrote The Genius of Jesus. We had, Dan Fleischman and some of these other guys. We did a snow hike up in the mountains with no shirts on in the snow, and it was crazy, but it was incredible. Like doing Wim Hof breathing. And we have a summer one we're doing a private rodeo. A bunch of the guys are going to ride bulls, and we'll see. Hopefully, fingers crossed, no one gets hurt. But again, just got to do those things that scare the hell out of you.
Do you just have them sign a liability waiver?
Yeah. Just kind of hope no one gets, hurt too bad. I'm actually taking 70 guys in July to go run with the bulls. For sure.
Spain?
Yeah. For sure, somebody's getting injured with that many of us going.
Yeah.
But, it happens. That's part of growth. And so
You're living. That's living.
But that's what, if people want to find out more, wapmovement.com. And like I said, there's a ton of things we're doing. We do these quarterly events. Just follow me on Instagram, Mr. Jimmy Rex. You can see all the stuff we're doing. And I'm always posting any, of these trips we go on or any of these other events.
And where can they find your podcast?
The Jimmy Rex Show, iTunes, Spotify, and we interview exceptional people like yourself, and it's just a fun podcast where you never know who's going to be the next guest.
Well, it's such an honor that you chose to take the time to come to our little small podcast, but we do have an amazing audience, and our listeners are just hungry for information, growth, spirituality, wellness, all the things. So
I love it. Yeah. It's awesome what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming, Jimmy.
You bet. Thank you.
Again, thank you to all of our listeners. We love you. We hope you enjoyed Jimmy Rex as much as we did. He's so much knowledge and experience, and he's the real deal. So thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget,
be you, stay wild.
Yay Networks.